Good morning, everybody. I was trying to stand behind Steve and do my best Chris Christie imitation behind Donald Trump, but I don't know if Steve looks enough like Donald or not. Let me introduce our panel, if I could. Our topic is going to be an environmental panel discussion. As Steve said, this is our third year in a row doing this panel. It's proven to be pretty informative for everybody, so we're going to get an update from the industry experts. Let me start with our panel with Emily. Emily Kosmalski is Senior Associate, National Environmental Policy Act Department Manager and National Account Manager at Terracon Consultants. Terracon is a national environmental and geotechnical consultation firm with over 3,500 employees, with over 130 offices nationwide. Emily is an industry expert in environmental and NEPA evaluations. Did you write that?
I did.
For the FCC, as well as numerous additional lead federal agencies. She's managed thousands of Phase 1 ESA, NEPA, industrial hygiene, and Section 106 projects. Emily holds a master's degree focused on environmental impact assessment and resides in a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia, and I can't remember the name of it.
It's tequila. You
Tequila. I had a hard
so
time saying it last
for
year.
you.
That's right. Will Bates. Will is one of 3 vice presidents of Tri-Leaf Corporation, a full-service nationwide environmental and property consulting company providing services such as Phase 1 environmental site assessments, NEPA reviews, historic preservation, migratory bird evaluations, wetlands, and so forth. Will graduated from Boston University, from Boston, in 2008, with a BA in biology and a minor in archaeology. Since starting at Tri-Leaf Corporation in 2009, Will's managed over 7,000 telecommunications, NEPA, and Phase 1 environmental site assessments. Will has managed to work for all 4 major carriers, spread over all 50 states and Puerto Rico. Will manages 4 offices for Tri-Leaf, located in the Mid-Atlantic, Midwest, and the South. Then there was Marvin. Marvin is president of ECA, an environmental cultural resources and National Environmental Policy Act regulatory consulting firm. Marvin is recognized as an industry expert in environmental and NEPA evaluations for wireless communication facilities and other federal project types. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree and also a Master of Environmental Science and Policy he earned from the Evergreen State College, which is where? Where? Washington State. I don't know why you left. Marvin's experience includes principal review of literally thousands of environmental and NEPA projects. You can kind of see where this is all going. He has assisted clients in navigating just about every conceivable issue that can arise, including contamination, historic property viewshed issues, archaeological sites, tribal concerns, and wetland, floodplain, and protected species impacts. So if you would, we're going to take a look quickly at our agenda. Will and Marvin and Emily will be hitting on these 3 topics: tribal consultations, give us an update on that; improving our NEPA timelines, which we're all interested in trying to see how we can get moving quicker on our projects; and some natural resource changes that they'll update us on. So if you would, please help me in welcoming our panel.
This morning on my balcony, going over my prepared comments, I looked out across the countryside and realized what a beautiful day it is in Nashville and what an amazing part of the country this is. First inhabited 15,000 years ago by humans, a country in which buffalo and elk were just everywhere, teeming with wildlife, into which French trappers came. At one point it was the leading edge of the American frontier, into which American frontiersmen came. The Robertson and Donaldson parties came into Nashville, founded Nashville. Here you have the Cumberland River, you have Andrew Jackson, you have the Hermitage, and not least of all, you have the historical home place of country music. And so we get to talk for just a few minutes about how that rich cultural heritage blends into what we do every day. National Environmental Policy Act and National Historic Preservation Act require that federal agencies, in our case the FCC, and in some cases the FAA, consider the impacts of their projects on cultural, archaeological, historical properties. A subset of those being Indian, religious, and sacred sites. That's what we call the tribal consultation process. There are 566 federally recognized tribes in the United States. Those are the tribes that the federal agency must consult with to determine whether or not there is an effect to Indian religious or cultural sites, whether or not that effect is adverse, and if it is adverse, that measures to minimize or avoid adverse effects have been taken. The consultation process is a diplomatic process. The reason it's a diplomatic process is because the tribal relationship to the federal government and the federal agency is a government-to-government relationship that is governed largely by treaties. So when people say, why can't we get a shot clock for tribes, or why can't we control the fee structure for tribes, the answer to that question is very similar to the answer to the question of why can't we stop the European Central Bank from devaluing the euro. You just can't force a sovereign nation to do something just because you want them to do it. The way that the FCC does tribal consultation is it requires the applicant to make that certification. We do it through the Tower Construction Notification System. That's a mechanism. In 2005, when TCNS company came into play, the federal agency asked the tribes to go in and select their geographic areas of interest, areas where they believed that they had ancestral claims to the lands in those areas. The applicant comes in, typically with the consultant, and enters a geographic point for an FCC licensed facility for new construction or for a significant modification to an existing facility. By that process, the applicant receives a list of tribes that are interested in a particular location. Once a tribe expresses an interest, the applicant can't move forward with the determination that there is no effect until that tribe has either claimed that there is an objection to the facility or that they're no longer interested in the facility. What we've seen is generally an increasing trend toward tribes expanding the geographical interest, areas of interest that they have, and also an increase in tribal fees. So if you look at this slide, this is the Wyandotte Nation. They don't really come too far down south. The light blue is where we started in 2005 with their original area of interest, and the darker blue is areas that they've added over time. There's a similar map for the Eastern Shawnee. You see their interest is most of the eastern part of the country, a few tribes, a few counties in the Great Plains, and then you see that there are three colors here because the Eastern Shawnee came in initially, well not initially, but subsequently claimed all of Kansas, and then decided there were only a few counties in Kansas in which they were interested, and then lastly added the state of Louisiana. With this graphic, I noticed there's a problem with it. These lines should be stair-stepped and not diagonal, so we'll fix that. But basically what it shows is that in 2005, we went from paying nothing for tribal review on a per-site basis to somewhere around $150 to $200. And now we've got tribes that are not per site, but per tribe, $400, $500, $600, $1,000, $1,500 a tribe. The back of the napkin for me is that it should take the Secretary of the Interior, qualified archaeologist, a couple of hours, billing at a rate of $150 an hour, and then $50 or $100 for logging the project in, doing the back office, invoicing for that service. So that gets you to $350 to $450. So I think that's probably a reasonable level for review. Not being inside their organization, I don't know what their process looks like ours. So if it doesn't, then that would be a delta. I won't talk about the timeline, and who's going to go into that. One thing I would say is that relative to your archaeological requirements, your tribes can drive the fee that you're going to pay. 15, so that's twice as much work. And we sometimes receive NEPA line items in a matrix or a driver matrix or a pricing matrix that ask us to include driver fees on a national or regional basis. So we politely ask you not to send us those because even if we got it right today, there'd be no way to get it right over a large geography, and it would very likely change tomorrow. The last thing I'll say is that relative to having success with tribes, my advice would be to work from your heart. It's a lot easier to do business or to work with someone who is who you trust and who you like than someone with harsh words and lip. With that, turn it over to you.
And I could not agree with you more, Marvin. That's actually one of the things I'm going to be touching on in my presentation, which is improving NEPA timelines. And I chose this topic because it's actually the #1 question that I get from my clients is, how long does this NEPA process take? And inevitably, once I tell them, the next question is, okay, so how do we get it done faster? How can we do this quicker? And so in telecom, it's all about speed to market. And with the long lead times, NEPA is often the critical path, meaning this is the area that can hold everything else up in the process. That's due to the fact that you can't move to construction until you have NEPA approval. So what is NEPA exactly? As Marvin touched upon it, that's the National Environmental Policy Act from 1969, requiring the federal government to consider environmental impacts of its action. For cellular projects, the trigger is NEPA FCC licensing. So any project where you have FCC licensing, you're likely going to be having to comply with NEPA. So how long does this process really take? A standard, no-issue, run-of-the-mill NEPA can take anywhere from 80 to 120 days, or roughly 3 months. So this is when everything goes well. When everything goes well, this is a 3-month-long process. If you're going to add an environmental impact, then you're looking at completing an environmental assessment, or an EA. The EA will need to demonstrate how you're going to minimize or mitigate the impact, and that adds several more months to the process. If you need to negotiate an MOA with the SHPO, that negotiation process could add months to even years. So now that you know how long it takes when things go well, what about when things take longer? What can we do? What can all of us do to reduce timelines? There's many factors that contribute to this, and I've developed a punch list up here of things that all of us can do to counteract the common NEPA pitfalls. I've listed them on this slide, and I'm going to go into each one by one. So the first item on this list is improving the ordering process. And I know this seems like common sense, but it's honestly where we see at least half of the holdups come from. There's a lot of moving parts in the telecom process. You've got your 1A, your 2C, your survey, your lease exhibit, your construction drawings. All of these drawings and all of these documents need to match. They need to coincide. That's the tower type, the height, the compound footprint, the access road, the utility easements. Every one of these items needs to match on every one of your documents. Any design changes to these items equals more time. And generally the rule of thumb would be the greater the change or the greater the increase in design, the more chance for adding NEPA time. And we handle this process through NEPA addendums. So every time you make a change to your design, we're having to do a NEPA addendum. On the same token, if you give your consultant multiple designs that conflict, they're left trying to figure out which one is correct. So that slows down the process with us trying to determine which is the accurate design, and it also runs the risk of the NEPA being completed using an incorrect design. And finally, if a project becomes a priority, do let us know, because there's things that we can do on our end to speed up the process, and we don't know something's a rush if you don't tell us. I would just say that don't treat every site like a rush, because the consulting parties do get rather upset with you when you do that. So bottom line, everything needs to match on all the documents, and design changes add time. This next slide covers an extra step that can be taken before site selection, which is called a NEPA pre-screen. And the pre-screen is done to identify obvious NEPA red flags prior to site selection. So you can either do it before site selection so the issues can be avoided, or you can do this at the beginning of the NEPA process so they can be considered in design. You might have multiple candidates in a search ring, and if so, consider having your consultant do a feasibility study. See which one of these candidates might have the least impact on your NEPA items. Just remember that this is preliminary information. You still have to go through the NEPA process. And so it helps you to stay ahead and avoid obvious or easily obtainable information or NEPA issues, but you still have to go through the process and things could come up then. The next slide that I have is a great benefit, but only if the agency is agreeable. So let's say that you've got a tower with an adverse impact to historic properties, and that requires mitigation with the SHPO. That could result in the completion of a lengthy MOA process that requires a legal document that must be coordinated between the SHPO, the FCC, the tribes, the different agencies, and that could take months to years. And the completion of the MOA and the adverse effect also necessitates an EA, which again adds time to the process. So rather than going the MOA route, you could consider suggesting, at least asking, if your SHPO would be amenable to doing a conditional no adverse effect. The conditional no adverse effect is where you commit to completing a mitigation, or you actually complete the mitigation, and the completion of said mitigation makes the effect no longer adverse. And so what you'll get is a document that says that you don't have an adverse effect. So it's not something that every SHPO and agency will go for, but in the areas that it can be used, it does save quite a bit of time. So this next step also seems like common sense, but it's definitely worth remembering. We do have to consult with numerous agencies and tribes, as Marvin had mentioned. We've got the Fish and Wildlife, the SHPO, the DNR, numerous tribes, local governments. And it's important to remember that these are not just faceless government agencies. You're dealing with people. You're dealing with human beings. So use diplomacy. Treat them with respect. Try to get to know them. Develop relationships with the consulting parties. If you have good relationships with the stakeholders in the process, they'll be more inclined to help you out in your time of need. The next slide covers ways that you can be creative. If you're in a challenging area, for example, let's say that you're in a flood zone, maybe you could design your footprint to stay outside of the flood zone. If you're in a historic district, can you work with the SHPO on selecting your site or possibly designing a concealment strategy? So think outside the box and try to stay ahead of the issues. And finally, this slide covers the NEPA exclusions. NEPA exclusions help you to eliminate some or all of the process, and I have them listed up here, but it's highly generalized information and you should talk to your consultant. We've provided information at the end of the slide with all of our information. William?
Thanks, Emily. So sometimes in our position as consultants, it feels like we're in business to give bad news because the trend is generally toward more red tape and not less. But one of the things I want to note that we're up here trying to do is just notify kind of impartial trends that we're seeing and how we can help by projecting how those trends are going to continue. And that's part of what I want to talk about today, some trends that we see in natural resource conservation. So I'm going to try to persuade you that a fungus-related disease is going to cause some complications to tower siting. I'm not a loon, stick around, I'll tie it back together. There is a disease in the northeastern United States called white nose syndrome that has been impacting more bat species. It's decimating the population. It generally affects those bats that roost in caves in large populations and large colonies. But recently it's been making their way, the disease has been making its way toward the southwest. I think most recently it's made it all the way to northern Louisiana at the southernmost, and Missouri at the westernmost. I don't think there's any reason to suspect that it's not going to continue heading that direction. And where that weighs in on what we do is there are a lot of bat species that are on the Endangered Species Act. One of those bat species is the northern long-eared bat, the Indiana bat, the gray bat. These are bat species that you might be relatively familiar with at this point because they've been coming up fairly frequently on responses from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Most recently, so the Endangered Species Act has been around since the 1970s, right? 1973. And it goes through routine amendments, things that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife changed over time. On February 16th of this year, they added an amendment for the incidental take of northern long-eared bats. What they did was they made it illegal to cause even accidental a take being a killing of some kind for the northern long-eared bat. So just a scenario, you're tower siting, you have some trees, they're 6 inches in diameter, there are northern long-eared bats roosting in that tree. So an otherwise lawful activity like cutting down those trees in order to build a tower becomes an unlawful activity if there are northern long-eared bats within that tree. I think because of this amendment, the direct effects we're going to feel from it are that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the different offices are going to be more focused on preventing tree, taking down trees. And we've already seen that occurring. If you can go to the next slide, I'll give you some examples. We had a site in Kentucky. It was a 260-foot tower. There were some trees. It was in a wooded area, about 6 inches in diameter trees, about 5 of them. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife responded that they thought it was potential habitat for Indiana bat, and they thought there were also northern longyear bats nearby. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Office in that case had 2 options. Now this was in the fall that we were proposing this tower site. They said, you can either wait until next summer to do a bat survey, because bats, right, they hibernate in caves during the winter time, so they wouldn't be there during the fall or winter. So we either wait until summer, the following summer, do a formal bat survey and see if there are any northern longyear bats in those trees or Indiana bats. Or we could perform a conservation MOA. That was our only 2 options to get the U.S. Fish and Wildlife to sign off on this project. Neither one of them that we really liked, but take for the scenario that we did wait until the following summer, which would obviously adversely affect the timeline, and we still found bats in those trees, and we ended up going through a conservation MOA anyway. So our client in that case decided to do the conservation MOA. An MOA, as we were talking about earlier, is a memorandum of agreement. It's a contract that is between the agency and the carrier or the tower company. It is a lot of times very time consuming and costly, but it was our only option in this case. And I don't see any reason for that not to continue. I think if you're doing a site in Kentucky going forward, you do have trees within your proposed lease area, the access easement. If you can avoid those trees, that would be really helpful, especially if they're larger trees, anything over 4 or 6 inches in diameter. Otherwise, you're probably going to run into this very issue. Another case study was a site in Texas. It was a 241-foot tower in a vacant lot, nothing else there. The Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, the TPWD, which is a state conservation agency not affiliated with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, they recommended that vegetation be cleared between September and February. They recommended that we specifically design the power connection to avoid bird electrocutions. I don't know how that works. I have to go to an engineer to decide that. But they want us to monitor for whooping cranes that might be nearby, and they want us to do a formal survey for gold-cheeked warbler. This isn't so much associated with bats, but I think it speaks to a trend that we're seeing that conservation agencies and U.S. Fish and Wildlife offices are making more and more recommendations, whereas historically they would just stamp it no adverse effect or whatnot. Now they're making recommendations for minimizing impacts. Similar to how we saw a few years ago when they put out the mitigating impact guidance for migratory birds. Now they're making a lot for endangered species as well. There's another example in Indiana. It was a 180-foot monopole. Now the U.S. Fish and Wildlife cleared the project, but only contingent upon tree removal in the wintertime. Again, speaking to that, the bats would presumably be in their cave roosts during that time. I think throughout the Midwest and the South, this is going to be the new norm. That if there are trees on the site, you can't avoid them. Generally, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is going to recommend that if you have to remove them during a certain time period, that being between basically the winter time and the fall period and spring. So the last topic on my list is a little bit different. I hope I looped the fungus back in, by the way. So the last topic on my list, and we'll shift gears a little bit, I'm going to talk about the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act has been around since the 1970s also, but the last amendment was all the way back in 1986. That act, it's administered by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, but the regulatory authority is actually the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, on that act. Recently, last year, the EPA put out a new final rule, they call it the Clean Water Rule, that tries to clarify what was historically a little bit gray. So the Clean Water Act, the attempt is to protect those waterways that could also protect downstream waterways. So tributaries, wetlands, things like that are connected to those waterways, which they consider navigable waters or U.S. open waters, another term for it. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers wants that to be considered jurisdictional. They want jurisdiction over those areas. And in order to streamline those areas that are not navigable or not connected to those navigable waterways, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers does not want to see those. The problem we see as consultants, the challenge that we see is we have to provide an opinion on whether or not those waterways are considered jurisdictional, because going to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and asking them to decide that could take 6 months to a year, being a government agency. So the attempt most recently last year for the Clean Water Rule was to clarify some of the stipulations that allow us to make those decisions. Now the EPA insisted that under the new Clean Water Rule, They wouldn't be adding any waters that weren't already considered jurisdictional under the old rule, but that doesn't quite pass the smell test, because if you see some of the distances that they use to clarify, it could cause some concern, or at least increase more areas that could be jurisdictional. So, although it was enacted, it was actually put in place in August of last year. Pretty much immediately in October, it was put on stay. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals put on stay. It's not currently active, but I think it's probably going to be re-ratified, I guess is the word for it, sometime this year, which could affect tower siting if you're impacting wetlands or waterways. So on the next slide here, you'll see a diagram that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers puts out. I'm not going to go through all the stipulations in it because the new clean water rule is kind of complicated. It's a giant checklist. But I could just give you one example. There's a couple terms that they clarify. One being tributary. Tributary is generally, as consultants, we just think of them as any blue line on a topographic map, right? That's easy to tell. But now they clarify it as being anything that has a bed, kind of an obvious bed, and a high water mark, things like that. It doesn't include ditches that are just kind of ingress-egress flow, but anything that's fairly perennial that goes downstream and empties out into another tributary, which is a river, watershed. And they also clarified what a significant nexus was. Significant nexus is just another way of saying connected in some way. Just as an example of one of the clarifications they made, if you're within a 100-year floodplain, you can be 4,000 feet from a tributary and still be considered within a significant nexus of a natural waterway, which pretty much means the entire state of Louisiana is a significant nexus. So if you have a wetland in that area and this clean water rule is enacted sometime this year, I think it's safe to assume that that is going to be considered jurisdictional. Now, the EPA insists that it was always considered jurisdictional, that just wasn't obvious. But I think some of these rules will kind of set that in stone. I do just want to reiterate, though, that this is strictly related to new tower sites. It's the only time we have to worry about these, and it's only new tower sites that are going to have an impact on wetlands or waterways. So your standard tower and ag field still isn't going to be a problem as long as that ag field isn't wetland. So just to kind of wrap it all back together, natural resource changes that we're seeing. I think tree clearing restrictions for the northern long-eared bat, Indiana bat, and gray bat in their territories, I think it's going to continue. I think it's going to spread. I think right now we're seeing it a lot in the Midwest, but I think it's going to spread to the majority of the South and head westward as that's occurred. I think there's going to be more attention to U.S. Fish and Wildlife volunteer guidelines. Those relate to migratory birds like whooping cranes, golden cheek warblers, things like that. I think state agencies are going to make more and more recommendations, and it's going to be our challenge as consultants and tower companies to decide what recommendations we want to implement from those recommendations. Some of them are standard recommendations like, well, we really prefer you build a less than 200-foot tower. Of course, if you're planning a 250-foot tower, it's not really an option, right? But some recommendations you can implement, doing monitoring for whooping cranes and things of that nature, if you wanted to manage your risk. And lastly, I think changes to the Clean Water Act, should they be upheld in courts, could complicate tower siting, but only a slim margin of tower sites, potential tower sites that could be located in wetlands or have impacts on waterways. So I hope that helped. Some trends.
And actually, if there's 2 minutes left, I kind of sped through the rest of my presentation just because I was worried we were short on time. But I did want to just go over the NEPA exclusions. Co-location versus the new tower is always going to get you more for your money. Tower co-locations is the best way to go. That offers the most exclusions. Non-tower co-locations, in the case that the structure or the design meets a certain criteria. There's also an exclusion in industrial park and shopping centers for towers under 200 feet. There's exclusions offered for replacement towers, temporary towers, towers and antenna farms or previously designated areas. And there's a multitude of new exclusions for facilities that are sited within a utility right-of-way. It has to be an above-ground utility right-of-way. And the next slide is just items that you should avoid. Make sure all your documents match. Avoid wetland impact. Stay out of the floodplain. Try not to build near historic properties, or if you do, pre-negotiate with the SHPO. Avoid, like Will was talking about, a lot of tree clearing in the southeast. And of course, any site that's on tribal land or federal land has a completely different NEPA process and that's going to be